Okay, so it is Erev Yom Kippur, Friday, October 11th, and we are meeting today, and then we will not be meeting again until November 8th, because the next two next two Fridays are Yom Tov, the second day of Sukkot, and then Simchat Torah, and then the following Friday, I'll be in New York, starting to celebrate my son's wedding, because we're having a Shabbat for out-of-town family and such. So anyway, so next 3 weeks will be filled with simchas, and that's assuming we make it through. That's assuming we make it through Yom Kippur. Poo poo poo. Okay. You have a question, Bess?
No, just I won't be here November 8th, but that's irrelevant.
Okay, well, we're going to be recording, so, yeah. Okay, so I have us on, I'll say the bracha in a moment, Judges chapter 14, beginning with verse 14, on page 272. So page 272 of this edition. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So let me just read the first 13 verses in English, so we have the background, and then we'll pick up. And Samson went down to Timnah, saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines, and he came up and told his father and mother, and said, I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines, now therefore get her for me to wife. Then his father and his mother said unto him, Is there never a woman among its daughters, among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said unto his father, Get her for me, for she pleaseth me well. But his father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord, for he sought an occasion against the Philistines. Now at that time the Philistines had rule over Israel. Then went Samson down, and his father and his mother, to Timnah, and came to the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion roared against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him, as one would have rent a kid, and he had nothing in his hand. But he told not his father or his mother what he had done. And he went down, talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. And after a while he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion, and honey. And he scraped it out with his hands, and went on, eating as he went. And he came to his father and mother, and gave unto them, and they did eat. But he told them not that he had scraped the honey out of the body of a lion. And his father went down unto the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for so used the young men to do. And it came to pass when they saw him, that they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said unto them, Let me now put forth a riddle unto you, if you can declare it me within the 7 days of the feast, and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of raiment. But if you cannot declare it me, then shall you give me 30 linen raiments and 30 changes of raiment, 30 linen garments and 30 changes of raiment. And they said unto him, Put forth thy riddle, that we may hear it. Okay? So just bizarre twists of plot here. You know, the lion appearing out of nowhere, and he's ripping it to shreds, but he's not telling anybody that he did it. And then it seems like the details of the story are kind of out of kilter. Like he met the woman, the Philistine woman, but then it seems like he's meeting her again here, and then introduces her to the family, and then gets married. So it's unclear all the details of the story. And then also now he's putting forth a riddle. What's that all about? Is that something that was common at wedding feasts in ancient times, that the groom would come up with a riddle, or is this unique to Samson? Don't know. But let's go on. Verse 14. Vayomer lahem, me ha'ochel yatsa ma'achal, ume'az yatsa matok, velo yachlu lahagid hachida shloshet yamim. So he said to them, this is the riddle, out of the eater comes food, and from strength comes sweetness. And they were not able to answer the riddle for 3 days. Now he said 7 days. I'll give you 7 days to solve the riddle. So 3 days, they couldn't figure this out. From the eater comes food, from the strong comes sweet. 15. Vayehi bayom hashvi'i vayomru le'eshet Shimshon pati et ishech v'yaged lanu et achida pen nisrof otach v'et beit avich ba'esh haleyarshenu kratam lanu halo. So on the 7th day, they said to the wife of Samson, seduce your husband. So it says entice, but it's more seduce your husband so that he will tell us the riddle. That is, he'll tell us the solution to the riddle. Because if not, then we'll burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you called us hither to impoverish us? Like, in other words, these 30 Philistine friends are intimidating this Philistine woman, she's not named yet, and threatening her. You better get the answer out of your husband, because we're not here to be humiliated and impoverished. That is, we're not giving up 30 linen garments and 30 changes of raiment. We need this answer. 16. Vatefk eshet Shimshon alav vatomer rak sneitani velo ahavtani hachida chadata livnei ami veli lo higadata vayomer la hine la'avi uleimi lo higadati velach agid. So the Samson's wife cried to him and said, you must hate me, and you do not love me. For the riddle that you put forth to my people, and you didn't tell me the answer. So, in other words, you must hate me. Why did you tell a riddle and didn't tell me what the answer to the riddle is? And he says to her, I didn't tell my parents, I should tell you? So that's, in other words, you have to say it in that tone of voice. Why should I tell you if I haven't told my parents? 17, Vatefk alav shivat hayamim asher haya lahem hamishteh vayehi bayom hashvi'i vayaged la ki hetsikatu vataged achida livnei ama. She cried for 7 days. Now, they come to her on the 7th day. So she cries for 7 days of the party. And on the 7th day, he told her why? Because she pressed him sore. That's the translation of hetsikatu. So she pressed him sore, like she wouldn't give up, asking and asking and asking. And he told her the answer to the riddle, and she told it to her people. 18. Vayomru lo anshe ha'ir bayom hashvi'i beterem yavo hacharsa mamatok midvash ume'az me'ari vayomer lahem lule charashtem be'eglati lo mitzatem chidati. So they said to him, that is the people of the town, on the 7th day, before the sun went down. So that the word for the sun going down is an unusual Hebrew word, Yavo ha-charsa. So before the sun went down, so they answered the riddle to him, what is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? And he said to them, had you not plowed with my heifer, you would not have figured out the riddle. So so Samson figured out how they got the answer. And he says, had you not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out the answer to the riddle. So calling his wife a heifer and plowing with a heifer. Okay. 19, Vatitzlach alav Ruach Adonai. So I'm getting a signal every now and then from Zoom telling me that my internet is unstable, but it looks like I have pretty good internet, so I'm just hoping that everything's okay. Vatitzlach alav Ruach Adonai, Vayered Ashkelon, Vayach mehem Shloshim ish, Vayikach et chalitzotam, Vayitain ha-chalifot lemagidei hachida, Vayichar apo, Vaya'al beit avihu. So now, remember, he has to give them 30 linen and 30 raiments. So the Spirit of God rested on him, and he went down to Ashkelon, which is, Ashkelon's in Israel today, but it's just a few kilometers from Gaza, and it's all part of ancient Philistine territory. So he goes, the Spirit of God rests on him, and he goes down to Ashkelon, and he kills their 30 men, and he takes their garments, and he gives the garments to the answerers of the riddle, and he was very angry, and he went up to his father's house. And verse 20, Vatahi eshet Shimshon lemere'ehu asher re'alo. But Samson's wife, so how's it translated here, was given to his companion whom he had had for his friend. Was given to his companion whom he had had to his friend. So does that mean that, was she a companion to him, to Samson? Or did he give her to somebody else? So it doesn't make sense. Like, it would make sense that he'd be angry with her for tricking him and giving up the answer to the riddle to the Philistines. And so he got angry at the Philistines too. So it might make sense. So it would not make sense that he made up with her. It would make sense that he gave her over to somebody else. But we'll see in the commentary here. We'll see what Alter has to say about it. Yes, Bess.
Is but the best translation for the conjunction?
Well, the letter Vav usually means and. It usually means and, but it can mean but also.
Maybe it happened without her consent or his consent.
What did?
She was given to somebody else.
Oh, it'd only be his consent. Certainly without her consent, absolutely. But he would be the one to make the decision about what would happen to her.
So he's punishing her for telling the riddle.
That's what it seems to me. So, and that's what this woman is not named. So I don't know if this is Delilah here or this is somebody else. I really don't know. The details are sparse and ambiguous, so I don't know. And we'll see what the commentary here says, and then we'll see what Alter says. Yeah, Barry.
One detail that's not sparse or cloudy is that he did pay his debt to the 30
Yes. Yeah, by
People
killing
who
other
are
people and taking their.
who are deceiving, who are deceivious, who deceive, who are
Yes.
devious and
Yes.
deceived him, but also by killing people who maybe had nothing to do with that.
Right. Right.
So
Absolutely.
that's
Absolutely. Yes. So there's violence in the story, random acts of violence. There's, it gets to also the purpose of this story here in the book of Judges. So this is our Bible. So it's not going to be, uh, very sympathetic to the Philistine side. In fact, it's going to be the opposite. And this also foreshadows what will come up in Samuel is all the battles with the Philistines, even to the extent where the Philistines steal the ark, and then David has to victoriously get the ark back and sing and dance with it as he brings it back to Jerusalem. So we're supposed to have we're supposed to know the whole Bible as we read the Bible to understand that this story is not in a vacuum, but serves as foreshadowing what's going to happen in the next 100 or so years in Israelite history regarding battles with the Philistines. So yeah,
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you.
no, go ahead.
Okay. The fact that he killed the lion by ripping him apart,
Yeah.
and it says as it was done with lambs or goats, that's against the Noahide laws, right?
Not unless you're gonna, if you're doing it in order to eat. Since he wasn't doing it to eat, but rather to perhaps protect himself from this roaring lion, you're allowed to kill animals that way. You can't hunt for sport, but we don't know if this was hunting for sport or whether this was just out of self-defense.
But it said I'm not looking for it, but I was looking for it. But that's as you kill a baby lamb.
Well, so you might understand that as you slaughter the lamb first, and then you tear it apart with a knife.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So that's how we could understand it if we want to make sure that Samson was a nice Jewish boy and kept kosher. So we don't know when the kosher laws really came into effect the way that we know them, and whether they were, for the rabbis, of course, the animals were slaughtered in the way that we know that they should be slaughtered back in the time of the Bible. But we don't know. We don't know that for sure. But there is a way to understand it through the story if we wanted to make sure that Samson properly shechted or people properly shechted goats first and then just tore them apart to get to divide it up into pieces. Okay, let's
What
look
was
at the.
the
Yeah,
what
go
was
ahead.
what was the I don't get the riddle. Maybe I'm looking for Jimmy Kimmel or something. But
What is the food that comes from the, so the riddle on verse 14 is, out of the eater comes forth food, and from the strong, that's the eater, comes sweet. So what's the sweet food that comes out of something strong? So it's a two-part riddle. What's the sweet food, and what's the something strong? So that's the riddle, because that's related to the honey that was from the lion. Right? So he ripped the lion apart, and then he found the carcass of the lion sometime later, and there were bees all around it, and there had been honey there. Oh, so this will make a nice riddle. Who would ever think that that honey could be found inside a lion carcass? Okay, so the commentary.
I've heard funnier.
You've heard, right. Riddles aren't supposed to always be funny. So there's, isn't there a riddle that King Solomon asks in Kings? There's stories of riddles that Solomon is able to solve that nobody else is able to solve. And so these are like these, they are brain teasers. So better to translate it as a brain teaser than as a funny than as a funny, jokey riddle. Okay? That's what it's supposed to be. Okay, so now on 272, for verse 14 forward. Bottom left, they could not. Their inability to solve the riddle was not surprising because it was based on an incident of which they had no knowledge. On the seventh day, namely of the week, not of the feast. Okay, why Rashi had to say that, I don't know. The riddle was propounded on Wednesday, and by Saturday they knew that the solution was beyond them. Lest we burn thee, etc. This was no idle threat is seen from chapter 15, verse 6, which is the next chapter, the similar threat to Jephthah in chapter 12. Hither, this is the translation of the Targum, the Aramaic, as if instead of halo, the text had halom, which some Hebrew manuscripts read. Metsudat David gives halo its usual meaning, is it not so? Before him, literally upon him. On 273, my father, etc., it's deduced that parents were regarded as standing in a more intimate and affectionate relationship than the wife. Shall I tell thee? An exclamatory question to which the intended reply is self-evident, like the way I had read it. The 7 days, that is what remained of the week from the fourth day onwards. Before the sun went down, at sunset a new day began. They waited until the last minute to enhance the zest of their triumph. Plowed with my heifer, that is, used devious methods. By heifer, he made a scornful reference to his wife, who had betrayed his secret. The reply in the Hebrew was the form of a rhymed couplet. Right. Lule charashtem be'egla ti, lo mitzatem chida ti. Yeah, so that's the rhyming. The spirit upon him, as verse 6, Ashkelon on the Palestine coast between Gaza and Ashdod, about 2 days' journey from Timnah. His anger was kindled against his wife, and he left her. 20, companion, that is one of the groomsmen mentioned in verse 11. So it's understood that he gave up his wife to somebody else. He's really upset by what happened, and he goes back to his father's house. Okay, let's see what Alter has to say here. So we're on page 181 in Alter from 14. From the eater, food came forth. The Hebrew uses cognate terms. From the eater, what is eaten came forth. The riddle, as is appropriate for riddles, is cast in a line of verse. It is, of course, an unfair riddle, hence Samson's confidence, because it depends on unique circumstances known only to the riddler, and nothing in its formulation provides a clue to the solution. On the fourth day, the translation follows the Septuagint, the Greek translation. The Masoretic text reads on the seventh day, but it is not credible that they would have waited until the very last moment, and this would also contradict the report that she pestered him for the solution day after day, right? So there was that problem with the details. So apparently in the Greek translation, instead of on the seventh day that the Philistines came to her, it was the fourth day. So then that jibes then with the rest of the details of the story. So there remains some problem about the number of days, because in verse 17, she's said to have been weeping before Samson 7 days, not 4. Entice. The Hebrew verb in context means something like cajole or coax, but it also has a sexual connotation, entice or seduce. And the Philistine men are clearly suggesting that she used her feminine wiles on her husband. Or we will burn you and your father's house in fire. Here the fire motif, introduced in the Annunciation scene, enters the story proper, right? Remember that the angel appeared out of a fire to tell the Manoach and his wife that in a year's time she's going to have a baby. So this, of course, an offer that the woman cannot refuse. So in other words, it's a threat, not an offer. Did the two of you call us here to beggar us? The Hebrew conjugates the verb call in the sense of invite in the plural, and the translation uses the two of you to make that clear. In effect, they are angrily accusing the woman of conspiring against them with her Israelite husband. Here, reading halom with the Septuagint for the Masoretic halo. You only hate me and don't love me. Here the dialogue has a sharp edge of realism. If you really loved me, you wouldn't keep secrets from me. And her speech, moreover, is accompanied by tears. Samson tries to resist and hold on to the secret, as we see in his immediate response, but in the end he succumbs to her persistent tears and imploring. Before the sun went down, they wait till the last possible moment to spring the answer on him, an effect perhaps highlighted here by the use of a quasi-epic flourish, beterem yavo hacharsa, in which the word for sun, charsa, is archaic and poetic instead of the standard shemesh. Had you not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. Their statement of the solution to the riddle, like the riddle itself, is cast in a line of verse with 3 accents in each verset. Samson's response is equally a 3-3 line, though he also uses rhyme, an occasional occurrence in biblical poetry. Eglati chidati. The plowing image is obviously sexual. If you had not played around with my wife, she would not have revealed the secret to you. Thus, Samson has no notion that his wife acted under a death threat, but instead imagines that she has been unfaithful to him, perhaps with 30 different men. He therefore departs enraged, not only against the 30 companions, but also against his wife. He went down to Ashkelon. Timnah is a small Philistine town in the lowlands, whereas Ashkelon is one of the 5 principal Philistine towns on the Mediterranean coast. Their armor. From the one other biblical occurrence of this term chalitza in 2 Samuel 2, it is clear that it refers to armor, not clothing in general. Samson then chooses to confront and kill armed warriors. It's probably the armor that he sends as changes of garment to the 30 men who were at his wedding. This would be an act of defiance, demonstrating to them the bold and deadly thing he has done. No mention is made of the fine cloths, perhaps because the armor is far more than the equivalent in value of fine cloth and garment. Samson's wife was given to one of his companions. The marriage is in effect annulled, and the plowing with Samson's heifer takes place after the fact of his mentioning it to the companions. One of his companions who had been in his company. The Hebrew uses a cognate noun and verb and literally says his companion. The subject and object of the verb are ambiguous. It could be read either as he, the companion befriended, was companion to him, Samson, or he, Samson, befriended, was companion to him, the companion. Okay, so incident number 1 was Samson and the Philistines. Now, chapter 15, let's see how far we can get. We'll read through verse 8. Vayahi miyamim biyamei kitzir chitim, vayivkod Shimshon et ishto bigdei izim. Vayomer avoa el ishti hechadra, velo netano aviha le lavo. So time passed, and it was now wheat harvest, and Samson visited his wife with a kid. No, with kids' clothing, that is goat leather or garments made out of goat. So, oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm reading it wrong. Bigdei izim. I'm reading it as bigdei izim, so it's not. So he visited her with a kid. Like, in other words, he brought this maybe as saying, I'm sorry, kind of thing. And he said, I will go into my wife in her chamber, but her father would not let him go. So now, in verse 20, right above the end of the chapter, it seems like he's giving her over to somebody else. A man can have more than one wife, but a wife cannot have more than one husband. So the fact that he gave her over would seem like he is annulling the relationship. So the fact that he's going back to her, I'm not sure the legality of this and how this would happen, and that's why her father is not letting him come to see her or go into her. So, verse 2, Vayomer Aviha, Amor Amarti, Ki Sano Seneta, Ve'etnena Le Mere'echa, Halo Achota Haktana Tova Mimena, Tehina Lacha Tachteha. So her father said, I said that she has been hated, or that you have hated her. I said that you hated her, and I gave her to your friend. So, but she has a younger sister who is better than her, or it could be translated as prettier than her. Let her, the sister, be for you in her place. All right, so he's coming up, Samson's father-in-law is coming up with a compromise. Can't let you have her. She's given over, and I thought you had said that you're giving her over, or that you hated her, so we gave her to somebody else. But I got a prettier younger sister for you instead. So 3, Vayomer lahem Shimshon, Niketi hapa'am mi plishtim, ki oseh ani imam ra'ah. So Samson said to them, who's the them? It's because it's his father-in-law that we had here. Who's the them? Unless it's other brothers of this woman, like other children, or an entourage that he's coming with. So he says to them, this time shall I be quits with the Philistines when I do them a mischief. Okay, I'm going to get back at them. So now he's not letting me have my wife back. He thought that I had given her over to my friend, and he's just giving me her sister instead. I'll show them. 4, Vayelech Shimshon, Vayilkod 300 shualim, Vayikach lapidim, Vayefen zanav el zanav, Vayasem lapid echad, ben shnei haznavot batavech. So this is what he does. Samson went and caught 300 foxes. And he took, yes?
Before you go on, you didn't mention it. The first line of that is he visited his wife with a kid. Are we to assume that that's
No, a baby goat.
a baby goat kid? Okay, that was my question. Was it a
Right.
kid or a kid?
No, a baby goat. Yes. Okay. So Samson goes and traps or catches 300 foxes, and he takes torches, and he turned the foxes tail to tail, and he put the torch between the two tails. Like if you can picture, he takes the foxes, so this is strong Samson, as opposed to the foxes biting him the whole time while he's doing this. He takes 2 foxes, takes their tails, and use the tails to tie the torch between them. Okay? And so then you're picturing then these 2 foxes that are faced away from each other with a torch tied to their tails, tied in their tails. 5, Vayaver Eish Balapidim vayeshalach bekamot plishtim, vayav'er migadish va'ad kama va'ad kerem zayit. So the torches burned, and they burned. He sent them into the standing corn of the Philistines. Remember, this is harvest season, so he's sending the foxes with the burning torches into the standing corn of the Philistines, and they burned both the shocks and the standing corn. So I don't know what that is, but I guess burned to bits the standing corn in the field until, and also the olive yards, so the olive orchard. Kerem is usually a vineyard, but here it's a kerem zayit, so it's an olive orchard. So the foxes with the burning torches burned down the corn and burned down the olives. 6. Vayomru plishtim. Yes, Bess?
They're facing out, or they're not facing together? Because
I
they
don't know
can't
how
move.
foxes can do this. They're just running. They're running randomly.
They can't run. They're tied back.
Okay,
to
you
back.
believe this story is true?
I'm sorry.
I'm just saying. You have to kind of allow yourself to understand that this is a fantasy. We don't know that this is true. There's no proof that Samson ever existed. So anything can happen in a story however you want it to happen. Okay, so how does he catch 300 foxes? That's what you should ask first. If you're asking about details of the story and whether they're true, how is it that he could catch 300 foxes? Okay, so I don't mean to be insulting you, Bess. I'm just pointing out that
I get it.
we're not supposed to be questioning the details of the story, just going along for the ride. Okay, so the 300 foxes, so it's 150 pairs, are running wild with fire in the cornfields and the olive orchards. 6. Vayomru plishtim, mi asazot? Vayomru, Shimshon, chatan hatimni, ki lakach et ishto, vayitna lemereyehu, vaya'alu plishtim, vayisrefu ota, viet aviha ba'esh. So the Philistines said, who did this? And they said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he's taken his wife and given her to his companion. Okay, so Samson's angry that his father-in-law gave his wife to a companion. So this is why Samson did it. So what did the Philistines do? They went and they burned her and her father with fire. Okay, I don't know what else to burn them with, but the Hebrew unnecessarily adds ba'esh, so burned her and her father in fire. 7. Vayomer lahem Shimshon, im ta'asun kazot, ki im nikamti vachem, va'achar echdal. Samson said to them, if you do in this manner, surely I'll be avenged of you, and after that I will cease. Vayach otam, shok al yarech makah gedolah, vayered, vayeshev, bisiif sela etam. He smote them hip and thigh with great slaughter. Not sure of the imagery there. Like what? Just shok al yarech. It's just interesting way to describe how he smote them. And he went down and dwelt in the cleft of the rock of Etam. Okay, so
Jonah,
yes.
because I've read the story of David and Saul and Samuel already, I'm a little confused. I should know this. Is this the first instance of introducing the Philistines, or have they already been introduced in previous stories?
We've seen them before, earlier in Judges or in Joshua.
But is this the first kind of outright?
Yes, like a full story about it, as opposed to passing detail, like when the Israelites conquered however much of the territory land of Israel in the time of Joshua, they conquered the Philistines then too. So, so there are references to it and other judges as well earlier in the book, but this is the first description of Philistines actually talking and encounters with them.
I guess what I'm getting at is, there's already enmity between the two groups, even
Well,
before.
so Barry, that gets to the question, which came first? Did the enmity in the time of David spark a reason to write a story to say how that enmity started? Or did the enmity actually start here and lead up to the time of King David? So that we don't know. Okay. Okay, so let's look at the commentary here on verses 1 to 8. Back to 274. After a while, literally from days. The precise interval of time is not known and may also mean after a year. Wheat harvest, about May. This is mentioned because of what is related in verse 5. A kid, intended as a conciliatory gift. Kids were customarily sent as gifts of affection. Utterly hated her because she had obtained the answer to his riddle and disclosed it to the Philistines. Said unto them, that is, to his father-in-law and to the other Timnites gathered there. This time, in contrast to the occasion when he killed 30 innocent Philistines. Be quits. He felt that his action was justified since he had been wronged. Foxes, some render jackals. The Hebrew word shual is, through the Persian shagal, the origin of the English jackal. That's interesting. Okay. 275, torches, pieces of wood wrapped in absorbent material and soaked in oil. Let them go. A similar practice has been recorded in Ovid. So this was a Roman thing. And it has been suggested that the Romans borrowed it from the Phoenicians, among whom it kept alive the incident narrated in this passage. Her father, a number of Hebrew manuscripts agree with the Septuagint and Peshitta. Peshitta is the Samaritan Bible, in reading the house of her father. If you do after this manner, that is, if this is the way you act, various interpretations have been placed on the clause, giving a man's wife to another, not compensating me with money for the loss of my wife and burning her. You did not punish her and her father for wronging me, but I took revenge on them for what I have done. So, the back and forth here, what's vengeance for what act? Cease, leave you alone. Hip and thigh, literally hip upon thigh, an idiomatic expression for complete discomfiture. Its origin is doubtful. Kimchi explains it either as footmen and horsemen, so the Targum, the Aramaic translation, or the fleeing and falling multitude. When a fugitive falls head over heels, his thigh is above his hip. Cleft of the rock, for the phrase, see Isaiah 2, and Etam, a town in Judah, as appears from the following verses. The rock was doubtless close by the town of Etam, about half an hour's journey south of Bethlehem. A different Etam is mentioned in 1 Chronicles. Okay, let's see what Alter says about these 8 sentences. 184. Let me come to my wife in the chamber. What he has in mind is obviously sex, and in fact, the initial verb could also be construed as, let me come to bed with my wife. I surely thought that you altogether hated her. He has 2 good reasons for thinking this. Samson's angry declaration that his wife has been unfaithful to him, and the 30 companions and his abrupt, to him with the 30 companions, and his abrupt return to his own father's house. To them, evidently, he is addressing not only his father-in-law, but other Philistines he views as complicit in wronging him. This time I am clear of the Philistines. I am clear of guilt for what I will do to them, seeing as how they have behaved toward me. The emphasis on this time returns later in the story. Caught 300 foxes. Most of the numbers in the story are multiples of 3. Samson himself, a feral hero, is repeatedly involved with animals, the lions, the foxes, and then the jawbone of a donkey. The foxes, running wild through the fields with fire at their tails, are an effective delivery system for spreading incendiary destruction. The stacked grain and the standing grain and the vineyards and the olive trees, these items cover most of the principal products of agriculture in this region. And moreover, the wheat harvest is just taking place, so the overall destruction is devastating. Burned her and her father in fire. Many manuscripts and 2 ancient translations read, her and her father's house. Fire answers fire now, and it's in the nature of fire, uncontrolled, to destroy everything in its path, much like Samson. If this is what you do, I will be avenged of you. The Philistine retaliation leads to a second round of vengeance for Samson. He struck them a great blow, hip on thigh. The implication is that he battered down a large throng of Philistines, though the number in this case is not specified. The word for hip usually means leg or calf of the leg, but hip on thigh is a fine old locution coined by the King James translators that effectively conveys the intended sense of a murderous thrashing. Okay. I think we can read a little bit more. Let's try to verse 15. Vaya'alu plishtim vayachanu biYehuda vayinatshu balechi. So the Philistines rose, and they camped in Judah, and they spread themselves against Lehi. Vayomru ish Yehuda, lama alitem aleinu. Vayomru le'esor et Shimshon alinu, la'asot lo ka'asher asa lanu. And the people of Judah said, why have you risen against us? And they said, to bind Samson, we have come up to do to him what he did to us. Vayardu shloshet alafim ish miYehuda el seif sela etam vayomru l'Shimshon halo yadata ki moshlim banu plishtim umazot asita lanu vayomer lahem ka'asher asuli ken asiti lahem. So 3,000 men from Judah went to the cleft of the rock in Etam. So like everybody knew where Samson was. So the 3,000 men went to him, and they said to Samson, didn't you know that the Philistines are ruling over us? What have you done to us? And he said to them, just as they did to me, I'm doing to them. So in other words, the Philistines think Samson did something first, and they need to get back at him. Samson thinks the Philistines did something first, and he needs to get back at them. 12, Vayomru lo le'esorcha yaradnu, letitcha biyad plishtim. Vayomer lahem Shimshon, hishavu li pen tifgeun bi atem. So they said to him, we've come to tie you up, to give you to the Philistines. And Samson said to them, swear that you will not fall upon me yourselves. So in other words, don't do it. Swear to me that you won't do that. 13, Vayomru lo, lemor, lo, ki asur ne'asarcha, unetanucha biyadam, vahamet lo nemitecha, vayasruhu bishnayim avotim chadashim, vaya'aluhu min hasala. They said to him, no, we're binding you up and giving you over into their hands, and we will not kill you. And they bound him up with 2 new ropes, and they brought him up out of the rock. Hu va ad lechi uplishtim he likrato vatitzlach alav ruach Adonai Vatihiena ha'ovotim, asher al zrootav kapishtim, asher ba'aru ba'esh, vayimasu asurav me'al yadav. So he came to Lehi. The Philistines shouted to greet him. The Spirit of God rose on him, or was in him, or that's the same phrase that came before. And the new ropes that were on his arms became like flax or like linen that was burned with fire, like nothing. And the ropes dropped off of him, off of his arms. Okay, Spirit of God enabled him to rip apart the ropes that were binding him. Vayimsa lechi chamor teri'ah, vayishlach yado, vayikacheha, vayachba elef ish. So then he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and he took it with his hand and smote 1,000 men with the jawbone of the donkey. Okay, so let's look at the commentary here. At bottom of 276, spread themselves in small detachments searching for Samson. Lehi, nearer the Philistine border than Etam, the site is unknown. Why are you come up against us? The Judahites feared an attack, and conscious of no action by them to warrant it, they asked the reason for the appearance of the armed bands. To bind, that is, that you, the Judahites, should bind Samson and surrender him. 3,000 men, Samson's strength in their estimation must have been extraordinary to require this number. What then is this unto us, by exposing us to attack through your dealings with the Philistines? That we may deliver thee, since the Philistines demand that you be surrendered to them, and you are liable to death according to the law of the land, and you are endangering our people, we may deliver you into their hands.
There's a note in our version that I think interesting. It says that they from Judah, as Samson was a Danite, the men of Judah felt themselves to be under no obligation to protect him at the risk to themselves. This is a further indication of the lack of national solidarity among the Israelites.
Okay, that's an interesting midrash too about the whole, because we'll see in a couple of chapters a near civil war that ensues too. So 277, yourselves, he demanded a pledge that they would only bind him and not hand him over dead, otherwise he would not be able to defend himself, since his wondrous strength was powerless against his fellow Jews. That's interesting. New ropes, as in 1611, they were used apparently because of their superior strength to old ropes. Scripture tells us this so that we may understand more clearly the incident depicted in the following verse, that even though Samson was bound with new ropes, they became as flax that was burnt with fire.
We know this is another silly question, but how did he know his strength wouldn't work against Israelites?
I don't know that he knew that. I think commentary is suggesting that. As flax, see 16:9. Dropped, literally melted. New, literally fresh. It was therefore heavy and tough. When dry, it becomes light and brittle. And jawbone, it was the first weapon to hand. In the East, parts of dead animals may often be seen lying about in the open. So let's look at altar on this. Bottom of 185, verse 9. Lehi, as elsewhere the name which means jawbone, is proleptic and is explained in verse 17. Okay, so you got the jawbone of the donkey, but here they're in the town of Lehi. It's the same word, Lehi, for both. To bind Samson, he is such a lethally powerful adversary that before they can think of killing him, they have to imagine immobilizing him by trussing him up. The notion of binding Samson will return in Delilah's dealings with him. 3,000 men, this is still another multiple of 3. As they did to me, so I've done to them. This unbending code of vengeful retaliation is fully shared by Samson and the Philistines. Compare verse 10. Vow to me that you yourselves will not harm me. He uses the emphatic pronoun before the conjugated verb to make sure that they are not the ones who intend to harm him. If they were, he would have to exert his power and wreak havoc among his countrymen, which he wants to avoid. On this condition, he allows himself to be bound. The ropes that were on his arms became like flax burning in fire. The fire motif is continued here in a simile, as it will be in Delilah's failed attempts to have him bound. New ropes also occur in the Delilah episode, the idea being that new ropes are in no way worn or frayed and so are very hard to break. Fell apart, literally melted. The fresh jawbone of a donkey, the skeletal remains of the beast are relatively new, and so the jawbone would not be dry and brittle. As before, Samson fights with an improvised and unconventional weapon. This is the second time he comes in contact with what is left of an animal carcass, an unclean object. The first time he draws out something sweet. Now, antithetically, he finds a weapon. All right, we will stop here for today and continue with the Samson stories in 4 weeks from today, right? 4 Fridays from today. So take care, everybody. Gemar Chatima Tova. May we be sealed for good in the book of life. Chag Sameach as well. And hopefully,
Fast.
and a meaningful fast. It's okay if it's hard, but it should be meaningful. Take care, all.
Martov.